The Denver Broncos might be the most dangerous team in football right now, and somehow the rest of the league is still acting like this is a side story. 9 wins and 2 losses, 8 wins in a row, undefeated at home, and they just took down Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in a statement game that should have been front page everywhere. Instead of talking about how real Denver looks at the top of the AFC West, most shows are asking one question on repeat: are the Chiefs in trouble? The shocking part is that while everyone is busy worrying about Kansas City, the Broncos are quietly playing like the team nobody wanted them to become again. Think about where this franchise was not long ago. Missed chances, heartbreaking losses, constant talk about what went wrong after the Russell Wilson era, and whether Denver would ever find stability at quarterback again. Now look at what is happening. One of the best defenses in the league, a young quarterback in Bo Nix who just outplayed Mahomes in the biggest game of his career, and a locker room that looks calm in every pressure moment. This is not a lucky run or an easy stretch of games. It feels like the moment where a team flips from hopeful to serious threat. And if you are paying attention, you can feel that shift every time they close out another tight finish. What nobody is really talking about is how they actually built this record, one tough week at a time. These were not all blowouts or simple matchups. There were ugly games, nail-biters, fourth-quarter drives, and opponents who were supposed to end the streak long before Denver ever reached 9-2. The real story lives inside those details. Which opponents really tested them, how they survived the close calls, and why this group now finishes games that past Broncos teams let slip away. To understand how real this run is, you have to go back through that entire path, and that is where the truth about this win streak really starts to show. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Broncos and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 300 likes on this video. Nobody wakes up at 9-2 by accident, and the Denver Broncos are proving that with every week that passes. People on TV love to say things like the schedule helped or injuries to other teams made it easier, but that is the lazy version of the story. When you look closely, you see tight one-score finishes, long drives in the fourth quarter, and games where one bad snap could have flipped the whole record. The crazy part is that Denver keeps walking into those pressure moments and walking out with another win, while a lot of teams with similar talent keep stumbling in the same spots. To really feel how big this is, you have to remember what used to happen in these moments. Think back to recent seasons where there was a clear path to a playoff push and it slipped away fast. A home game that got away against the Bengals, a painful loss to the Patriots that knocked them out of the race, matchups with the Chargers or Chiefs where one mistake in the fourth quarter flipped everything. Those were the weeks where Denver would play hard for 3 quarters and still leave with a sick feeling. Now the pattern has flipped. Those same kinds of games are turning into wins, and that is the difference between talking about next year and sitting on top of the AFC picture right now. Inside the building, that kind of turnaround does not happen by magic. It comes from a team that has stopped caring about style points and started caring only about what the scoreboard says when the clock hits 0. Players talk about living in one series at a time, trusting the defense to get one more stop, and trusting the offense to move the ball when everything feels tight. That mindset is the real engine behind this run, and at the center of it is a young quarterback who keeps dragging games over the finish line when it matters most. The next step is to look straight at Bo Nix and what he actually is right now, not what the loudest voices online keep calling him. The Denver Broncos have watched Bo Nix turn from a talking point into a lightning rod, and most of the noise has nothing to do with what he is actually doing on the field. You hear that he is a system guy, that he is carried by the defense, that he is just along for the ride while the team wins around him. But here is the twist. When you strip away the hot takes and look at the moments that decide games, Bo is the one standing in the center of almost every single turning point. The narrative says one thing, the tape and the results are quietly saying something very different. In his first 2 seasons, Bo Nix has built a resume that does not look like a young passer who is just trying to survive. It looks like a player who lives in the biggest moments. He already has 8 fourth-quarter comebacks in his first 2 years, more than any quarterback over that same early stretch since 1950, which is not normal at all for someone still learning the league. He has started 28 games, won 19 of them, and he leads the entire NFL in passing attempts this season, while still guiding a team that sits at the top of the AFC race. When people label him streaky or call him a mystery, they ignore the simple truth in front of them. A quarterback with that volume, that record, and that many late-game answers is not a placeholder. He is a franchise core who is still growing. What nobody seems to want to admit is how much pressure he has already handled, and how often he has answered when everything is on the line. Bo has taken every type of challenge this year. Long fields late in the game, heavy blitz looks, long stretches where the offense has to grind and stay patient, and he keeps finding a way to deliver the throw that keeps the season on track. The best example of who he really is did not even come in a game where he threw a touchdown, and that is where the story turns. Because when you look at what he just did against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, you see the clearest picture yet of the kind of quarterback Denver actually has. The Denver Broncos just watched Bo Nix go throw for throw with Patrick Mahomes in a game that looked built for drama, and he did it without a single touchdown pass on his stat line. He finished 24 of 37 for 295 yards, no turnovers, and full control when everything tilted toward chaos. On paper, that might look quiet to someone who only checks box scores, but when you look at when those yards came and what the situation was, it feels like the kind of performance that changes how a whole fan base sees its quarterback. This was not about flashy highlights. It was about doing every small thing right in a game where one mistake could flip first place in the division. From the opening drives, you could tell this night was going to test his patience. The Broncos had drops, drives that stalled, and long stretches where the Chiefs' defense forced Denver to grind instead of chase big shots down the field. Kansas City tried to mess with Bo using pressure, sending extra rushers on almost a quarter of his dropbacks, yet he carved them up when they came after him, going 6 of 8 for 113 yards against the blitz. The turning point came with the score tied late, deep in Broncos territory, when a 3rd and long threatened to hand Mahomes the ball back with time to steal it. Instead, Nix ripped a strike to Courtland Sutton beyond the sticks, then hit him again to barely move the chains, then dropped a perfect ball to Troy Franklin down the left sideline to set up the game-winning kick from Will Lutz. Every throw on that drive felt like a test, and he passed all of them. The most telling part is what that kind of game says about the larger picture. Bo did not need a 4-touchdown explosion to prove he can stand in that kind of spotlight. He needed to show that when the defense turns a heavyweight like Mahomes into a grinder, the offense has someone who can stay calm, take what is there, and slam the door when the chance comes. That is exactly what he delivered. But as good as Nix was, this win did not belong to him alone. The reason Denver even had the chance to put the ball in his hands with the game on the line is because their defense did something just as impressive to the Chiefs' attack, and that side of the ball has a story that might be even wilder than the rise of their quarterback. The Denver Broncos defense has gone from a question to a warning sign that every offense in the league now has to respect. Under Vance Joseph, this group has turned into a unit that looks angry on every snap, and the numbers back it up. They already have around 49 sacks through 11 games. They keep offenses under pressure from the first drive to the last whistle, and they are chasing the old 1984 Chicago Bears mark that people thought was untouchable in modern football. This is not bend-and-pray defense. This is a group that hunts the quarterback, attacks the line of scrimmage, and gives Denver a huge edge every single week. The best picture of what this defense has become came against Patrick Mahomes. Jaquan McMillan played like the field belonged to him. He jumped routes, came flying off the edge on blitzes, and turned a normal regular season game into what people are already calling his legacy night. He grabbed an interception on Mahomes, brought constant heat as a blitzer, and made 2 sacks in the exact moments where Kansas City was trying to steal back control. Every time it felt like the Chiefs were about to flip the momentum, McMillan or one of his teammates showed up in the backfield or right at the catch point and shut the door. That kind of impact from a corner speaks to how creative and fearless Vance Joseph has become with his calls. What makes it even more impressive is the faces that are doing this work. Denver went into that Chiefs matchup without Pat Surtain II, without veterans they normally lean on, and still watched players like Chris Abrams-Draine, Riley Moss, Talanoa Hufanga, and the front 7 rotation match up with the Chiefs' skill players and win key downs. Young pieces like Jonah Ellis off the edge and steady linebackers around him give this defense real depth instead of a thin starting lineup. They can bring pressure from everywhere, trust the corners to battle, and let the pass rush close out drives. When you combine that kind of defense with what Bo Nix is doing on offense, you get a team that can win in any style. And the wild part is that the hidden edge of this rise is not just offense and defense. It is the third phase that almost nobody talks about until it swings a game. The Denver Broncos are winning in ways that do not show up in highlight packages, and special teams is the clearest proof. While everyone talks about Bo Nix in the defense, players like Marvin Mims Jr. keep tilting the entire field in quiet game-changing moments. That returner threat forces every punt and kickoff unit to think twice, especially after a burst like his 70-yard run back that turned a normal series into instant scoring position. Those plays do not show up beside touchdown passes in casual debates, but inside a game they feel like a punch that takes the air out of the opponent and gives your sideline a sudden jolt of belief. Coverage has matched that same energy. Devin Key flies down the field on kickoffs and punts like he is trying to live in the opponent corner of the screen, blowing up returns before they ever get started. Dondria Tillman and Q Robinson help pin offenses deep, which might sound simple until you realize what that means for quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, starting drive after drive with a long field in front of them. Then you add Will Lutz, calmly drilling pressure kicks, while the crowd holds its breath, and you start to see the full picture. Denver is not just winning offense versus defense. They are stacking small wins in every hidden corner of the game, and those little victories pile up into the kind of control that never shows on a stat sheet, but always shows on the scoreboard. All of this creates a version of the Broncos that is dangerous, even on nights when one phase is not perfect, because the others can hold the rope and buy time. That is why a shaky series on offense or a penalty on defense has not broken this team the way it might have in past years. Special teams flips position, role players step into the spotlight, and suddenly there is just enough breathing room for Bo Nix and the defense to finish the job. But there is still one part of this machine that everyone inside the building knows has to rise if Denver wants to turn close wins into complete control, and it lives in the one area of the field where every yard feels like a fist fight. The Denver Broncos look like a complete team on most Sundays, but there is one part of this offense that still feels like it is holding something back. The ground game and the red zone trips have not matched the level of the defense or the passing attack, and that matters when every point can decide home field later. Losing J.K. Dobbins hurt because he was the back who could live between the tackles, stay patient, and turn nothing into something in tight spaces. Since that injury, you can feel the run game searching for a new personality, instead of forcing defenses to respect it on every snap. R.J. Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin both bring real juice. Harvey has quick feet and can bounce runs to the edge, while McLaughlin hits the crease fast and falls forward. You see flashes where they move the chains on short yardage and eat up key downs late in games, but it has not turned into a steady rhythm that scares defensive coordinators yet. Sometimes the call is a stretch run, sometimes it is a quick toss, sometimes it is a downhill look, and you can tell Sean Payton is still testing what works best for this new duo. Until one of these backs fully settles into that lead role and the line leans on a clear identity, the run game will feel more like a tool than a weapon, and that can show up in the most important 20 yards on the field. That tight area is where every weakness gets exposed. Over the last few weeks, Denver has been 2 of 9 on red zone trips, and that number tells you exactly where the focus has to be during the bye. Drives that start on a short field after a big return from Marvin Mims have ended in field goals instead of touchdowns, and trick plays like the throwback to Bo Nix almost turned into disaster. The good news is that this is a fixable problem, not a talent issue. A cleaner run plan, better use of McLaughlin in space, and sharper calls near the goal line could turn those 3s into 7s fast. If that happens while the defense and Bo keep playing at this level, the conversation stops being about a nice run in November and starts being about where this team could be seated in January, which is where the bigger picture really gets interesting. The Denver Broncos are standing at a crossroads that could define the next decade of the franchise. 10 years after their last division crown, they are back on top of the AFC picture, with a real path to finish as the first seed and host playoff games again. The Chiefs are chasing, the Chargers are slipping, the Raiders are trying to hang on, and strong teams like the Ravens and Texans are lurking in the conference, but Denver is the one holding the steering wheel right now. This is the part of the season where records stop being a fun surprise and start deciding who gets the easier road in January, and the Broncos have put themselves in a spot that almost nobody predicted when the year began. The schedule coming out of the bye is where that position gets tested. A primetime trip to face the Washington Commanders, then a rivalry game with the Raiders, followed by serious tests against the Jaguars and the Packers. None of those matchups are automatic, and every opponent will treat Denver like a measuring stick now, not an afterthought. Win the next couple and the Broncos can push their lead in the AFC West and tighten their grip on that top seed. Slip up, and the door opens for Kansas City or another contender to close the gap. That tension is what makes every snap from here on out feel heavier, because every drive can swing tiebreakers and seeding that will decide who has to travel and who gets to stay home when the playoffs start. The wild part is that Denver is not even fully loaded yet. Key players like Pat Surtain II, Alex Singleton, Jonah Ellis and Nate Adkins are working their way back. Young depth pieces such as Drew Sanders and others are waiting for a bigger role, and the coaching staff has a full week to clean up the red area issues and sharpen the run plan. At the center of all of it sits Bo Nix, not as a placeholder, but as the quarterback this roster is clearly being built around for the next several years. If this defense keeps hunting, the special teams keeps flipping the field, and Nix continues to grow into these pressure games, the real question is no longer whether the Broncos are for real. The real question is how far this version of Denver can push in January, and whether that road might quietly be leading all the way to Santa Clara for Super Bowl 60.